In interesting times, Thanksgiving feels a little bit weird this year, but there's a story for that coming up on the Accessible Faith Project. Hi there, I'm John, and welcome to the Accessible Faith Project. If you're new here and looking for insights into the Bible, faith, and history in ways that engage your brain, then please hit subscribe and that little bell icon so you can receive a notification every time I upload a new video. As we continue social distancing, I've been using the Accessible Faith Project to provide worship and devotional resources in addition to my educational videos. This one is a sermon, but as with most of my offerings, learning a little bit of history and context goes a very long way in helping us to understand things. May you live in interesting times. You've probably heard that before. It's supposedly an English translation of an ancient Chinese curse. The saying entered into widespread usage in the years leading up to the Second World War. Whether or not its origins are authentically Chinese are still a bit elusive, but we may be very familiar with it. May you live in interesting times. And unless you've been under a rock, hidden in a cave, it is impossible to say that the past few months haven't been interesting. The pandemic's ravages, coupled with the current election cycle in the United States and a local election here in British Columbia, and everything that goes with it, is interesting. But that is such a profound understatement that I have to be careful, or else I may come across as flippant at the genuine challenges that people are facing. Usually, I would say that there is no lack of topics for the Thanksgiving table this weekend, but given the current circumstances, our Thanksgiving tables may actually be virtual ones. This one is a year where the news that is out there is also directly impacting our lives here. And I think I might be right to say that we may be struggling to find something to be thankful for. It seems to be a little weird to have Thanksgiving right in the middle of all of this. It's important to remember that our Thanksgiving holiday, as we celebrate it in Canada today, has no real biblical link. The government created it in the 19th century, and given how cold the Canadian winters can be, giving thanks for the harvest and getting it ahead of the first bite of frost seems rather appropriate. We've since incorporated several American traditions from their November holiday of the same name, the obligatory turkey being the most obvious. That having been said, there was a yearly festival called First Fruits, described in Deuteronomy, often read on the Sunday before Thanksgiving. It is giving thanks for the harvest, returning to God for the very first fruits of the crop yield, rather than the general harvest at the end of the season. There is most certainly precedence in the Bible for giving thanks, so we don't have a problem with a holiday like this. But still, the Thanksgiving holiday comes this weekend whether we want it or not, and it comes at a time when watching the news has us reaching for a helmet. It seems kind of odd to be giving thanks when perhaps many of us turn on the news with some trepidation because many of us are worried about the immediate future. Maybe what we hear from Deuteronomy today might be helpful. Deuteronomy is a grand narrative where the people of Israel have fled from Egypt and have wandered in the desert for decades. The people of Israel are about to enter the promised land, leaving the wilderness behind them. But as they do, Moses gives them a sermon. The book of Deuteronomy, in part, is a creative way to present the law of the land and serves as a reminder of where they came from and who brought them there. There is a constant theme of moving to a good land where they will be free from the ravages of slavery and oppression. But being free takes some work, and chapter 8 is just a part of that. It goes like this. The Lord your God is bringing you into a good land with streams that flow from the springs in the valley and the hills. You can dig for copper in those hills, and the stones are made of iron ore, and you won't go hungry. Wheat and barley fields are everywhere, and so vineyards and orchards are full of fig, pomegranate, and olive trees, and there is plenty of honey. But don't forget the Lord. Moses said to Israel, after you eat and are full, give praise to the Lord your God for the good land he gave you. Make sure that you never forget the Lord or disobey his laws and teachings that I am giving you today. If you always obey them, you will have plenty to eat, and you will build good houses to live in. You will get more and more cattle, sheep, silver, gold, and other possessions. But when all this happens, Don't be proud. Don't forget that you were once slaves in Egypt and that it was the Lord who set you free. Remember how he led you in that huge and frightening desert where poisonous snakes and scorpions live. There was no water, but the Lord split open a rock and water poured out so that you can drink. He also gave you manna, a kind of food your ancestors had never even heard about. The Lord was testing you to make sure to trust him so that later on he could be good to you. And when you become successful, don't say, "I'm rich and I earned it all myself." It is a reminder, ironically, when times are good, we tend to leave God out of the picture, or like those who wandered in the desert for all that time, we tend to blame God for when things are bad. As much as this story is cast as Moses teaching the people before they enter the promised land, it was also a reminder to the people of Israel centuries later. Deuteronomy reminds the people of all of the blessings they have received from God and all of the challenges that God has brought them through. The great and terrible wilderness after freeing them from slavery in Egypt, the water from the rock, and the feasting on manna. After all of this, they eventually found their way to a good land. It was a reminder to future generations that their success was not about them, but was God's gift to them. One of the things that I have noticed about people is that we as human beings have a tremendous ability to adjust to our environment. Scientists call it sensory adaptation. When we get into a hot tub, it feels too warm, but then our body adjusts. When we wake up, we smell bacon and coffee with vivid awareness, and then 10 minutes later, we don't really notice them so much. We can set aside painful events of the past and learn from them. It is part of our biology, and it can be useful for our emotional and physical survival. This passage from Deuteronomy suggests to the Israelite people that they remember a difficult past and remember all that God had done for them. That way, they can notice the gifts of the present, to realize that all that God has given them. Thanksgiving is an excellent time to practice what we might call the spiritual disciplines to remember the past and paying attention to the present. Our Canadian Thanksgiving is earlier than that in the United States, and it doesn't have much to do with pilgrims. Instead, it is a day of general thanksgiving to God for the blessings of a bountiful harvest. We also remember that Thanksgiving also comes out of remembering that God is not only there in the midst of the good times, but more importantly, walks with us in the middle of the bad. The whole underlying principle behind Thanksgiving is ultimately a spiritual question. It has everything to do with how we perceive the world, the universe, our relationship to it, and our relationship to God. Thanksgiving is a reminder that we are part of something much greater than ourselves, and that many factors in life are genuinely beyond our control. Rather than being mired in the negative, Thanksgiving helps us to focus on those things that matter, that life is truly a gift to be enjoyed, celebrated, and shared in both the bad times and the good. Amen.